Hey, we're back with another episode of the Unfair Advantage. Today we have a remarkable guest who's turned adversity into success. Based in a northern Texas suburb of Dallas, he's the driving force behind a booming home service company, Your New Door, that grew from 4 employees in 2018 to 30 today, and he's got plans to hit 50 by the end of the year. Billy has been married for over 13 years and is a father of three, and two of his sons work alongside him. He's been in business since 2005, overcoming major challenges, including multiple six-figure IRS issues, thanks to his determination and innovative strategies. In this episode, we'll explore his journey, uncover unique hacks for early stage entrepreneurs, and discuss how to find and leverage your own unfair advantage. But before we dive in, let's not forget that today's episode is sponsored by Screaming Cow Marketing Group, which is your full service home service marketing agency that helps home service companies around the US grow more leads through utterly unforgettable marketing experiences. So if your business looking for more of the right work to do, call the guys who move. Billy, welcome on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually were just chatting as we were hopping on about Dan Martell and Buy Back Your Time and all those things, which is one of my actually favorite books. Whenever I onboard a new client, I actually send them his book and kind of like their welcome package. So I actually kind of want to bring that in a little bit later on in the episode. But prior to getting into all that, I kind of highlighted your company, Your New Door. But why don't you give everybody a little bit about what you guys do and who exactly you are trying to service?
Yeah, so we started this business. It was just me for a long time, right? Like a lot of entrepreneurs that is talked about in the book, the famous E Myth, right? And
Hmm.
I was no different, right? I had an entrepreneurial seizure. I was a great carpenter, technician, remodeling guy, right? Like I could do all the things, but and I thought I knew all the things, right? And one
Yeah.
day I realized that I didn't know, my ass from a hole in the ground, so to speak. And when I humbled myself and learned that I really didn't know anything at all, was really the day that I woke up and realized that I had so much to learn. And that was about 4 years ago. And it took me about a year to kind of get my feet under me and figure out what I needed to focus on first and early on in order to become a good businessman, a good boss, a good leader for the people that are here. But just a little bit about the company. We um, we sell, install, and repair residential entry doors, mostly exterior, like your front door, back door, patio door, things like that. We also do some interior stuff. We are focused on the homeowner market. We are demand driven, kind of. Most of our customers find us online, give us a call, and we see how we can help them out.
Okay. Okay. So I want to kind of talk about this growth aspect. So from 2005 to 2018, it was basically just you for the most part, right?
For the most part, from like 2010 to 2018, there was always two or three or four of us. It was uh, it was just enough work to kind of keep us going along, right?
Okay.
Like I was making a decent living, and things were kind of starting to pick up. We were doing our own marketing, always have, but I kind of it was a lot easier back, in the single digit 2000s, right? 2005, 8, 10. I taught myself how to do Google Ads in 2008, right? But back then,
Okay.
the interface was one or two pages, with like 10 KPIs, right? Now there's
It is
10
so
KPIs
complex
for
now.
10
Yep.
KPIs for 10 KPIs. And it's about, 600 pages of layers to get through if you don't know how to do that. Still kind of manage it a little bit. My friend Forrest Perry helps me some, but
Okay.
um, we we were I was making a decent living, right? I would work 2 or 3 days a week. My guys would work 3 or 4 days a week, and we would take off 3 or 4 days a week. Just had made enough money. We were surviving and all things. And one day I was like, this is fine for me, but these people, I was having turnover. I'm like, I'm never going to have people stick around if I'm only serving myself, right? If I'm only making
Right.
enough for myself and for no one else, because there was no opportunity or room for growth for anyone. We were just doing what we were what was in front of us, and so I talked to my wife and decided that we wanted to grow the business, right? So it was kind of a fork in the road, proverbially. I could, you know, continue on the path I was doing, make 2 or 3 thousand bucks a week, save for a
Yeah.
nice retirement, but I couldn't take anyone with me. I couldn't, no one else was going to make it other than me. Or we could grow the business, try and figure this out and take more people with us, right? Help more than just ourselves, which is how I've always been wired. And we decided to take that path and didn't know what we were doing, right? And as many in that situation don't, and just kind of figured it out along the way. Got around some of the right people, got some really good help, and made some tough decisions. And today we've been growing, pretty much doubling every year for the last 2 or 3 years. And we're around 30 or 32 people now and expect that we may be 40 or 50 by the end of the year. So we're definitely growth focused, growth oriented, and working on growing people and growing leaders to help us, go into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I I heard you say I went and talked to my wife. I like to joke and say like our wives are kind of like the forgotten co-founder in a way. Like they are the ones that deal with all of the baggage from the business, deal with everything that you come home with, have to
Yep.
be involved in the fact of like, hey, are we going to put our house up for, against this loan? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? Do we need to take less money in this month so that we can afford to pump more money into the business? And they're the ones that in a way are kind of helping you make those choices without actually having a name tied to the business or being that kind of leadership role in most cases to the company. So obviously there was a lot of like choices that went into that and to help you guys get from 4 employees to 30. Can you kind of dive deep into like what was involved in that process?
Well, just a little bit about the wife aspect, right? Like, I don't know if you follow me on social media for very long, you'll see me put her on a pedestal often, right? And
Hmm.
she's always had a really good job, and there was a very distinct stretch of time in there, probably about 3 years, that we would not have made it without her, going every day to her job and doing everything to support the household while I was trying to figure it out and investing. I say investing, putting all the money back into the business if there was any left at all, right? Like the age old problem of not, I didn't know how to charge for my goods and services. Didn't know what I was
Yep.
doing for a long time. Didn't know what a P&L was. So when I started figuring out how to do that, then the financial pressure started to lessen up and all things. But she is really the driving force and the secret of my success, in a lot of ways. And we wouldn't be here without her. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how much you've seen of kind of my background and everything. I had a business that closed before I opened up my agency. And like at the time, my wife and I had actually just got engaged. And we went from a 2 car household, like quickly in a matter of months to like only having 1 car. I had to sell the vehicle I had. Then we just got engaged. We had to move in with my mom and dad we moved from Kansas City to St. Louis, couldn't afford our rent, all these things. And I do a lot of the same thing. Like I in a way try to put my wife as like this is how much she does for me and for us because
yeah,
if it wasn't for her, like I wouldn't be where I'm at today. She's the one that told me in the last business, hey, it's time to toss in the towel. And she's the one that told me before I was ready to go back out into entrepreneurship again, like, hey, it's time. Like you need to get
yeah.
back out there. So
It,
they are definitely the support system we need.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like my wife isn't involved in the business at all in the day to day per se, right? But she is always in, the big decisions. The Her gut feeling has made and saved me more money, right, than my intellect ever will. And
Yep.
so I couldn't imagine, doing any of this or going anywhere or making
Yeah.
any big decisions without her
Yeah.
input. It's really is a secret weapon.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's tough at first to trust their gut feeling because like I don't know about you guys, I'm very much like a risk taker. Like if I could put it all up against a loan and do this and do that, like I would 100% go all in and probably would be living under a bridge at this point if it wasn't for her kind of reeling me back a little bit. Um,
Absolutely.
and there's times that I sit here and I'm like, is this her being reserved, or is like this like a good intuition? And I almost always lean on the good intuition because 9 times out of 10, like those are great odds in my opinion. Like it always proves to be right in that case.
Well, women do. It's a real thing, and I saw something the other day, just a headline about studies that are going on about women's intuition being a real
Yeah.
sense, right? Like a real thing, and it really is. It, like I said, it's made and saved me fortunes, by listening. And every time that I don't, I get in trouble, in some way. So
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
yeah,
So we're talking about like intuition and money, how it's saved money, how probably made money in different areas and everything like that. One of the things I love to do is at least once try to tie things into a little bit more of an unfair advantage in a way. So kind of what I want to highlight with you is you mentioned in kind of like the onboarding form we have that you went through multiple like 6-figure IRS issues. I
yeah,
grew up where it was like you don't even want to be a day late or a dollar short to the IRS because they're going to come knocking on your doors, this and that. I have a $3,500 tax bill out to the IRS right now because we didn't do proper tax planning last year. That is not the case. They don't come knocking on your door the next day.
yeah.
But even just that, I mean, that's $3,500, and I'm like, crap. Where am I going to find some of this cash and pull all the business here and there? 6 figures in IRS issues is a whole different ball game. So with what you can, would you mind kind of sharing kind of what that was like and kind of how you guys navigated out of that?
Well, so honestly, I've gotten tangled up with the IRS on two different occasions. The first one was early on, like 2005 to 2009, somewhere in there, where I didn't do my taxes at all, right? Like that, um, didn't know any better, really, didn't know what I was doing. I used to think that I could find out if I made money at the end of the year, not by looking at my bank account or anything else, but by taking a box of receipts to my IRS agent I mean my accountant, and give them those receipts and tell them how much we did, and hoping that I didn't owe anything, right?
Right.
And that was a win. You always try to wipe out any money that you ever made with write-offs in some sort. That used to be my philosophy. And then before I kicked that philosophy, I got all that cleaned up, went through all that, and swore I'd never get into any issues with the IRS. Well, early 2010, somewhere in there, 12 through 15 or 16. Um, Still didn't kind of know what I was doing. And, you know, the IRS, they absolutely know what they're doing. And ignorance is no excuse with them, right?
Yep.
So we finally got all that, put a bow on it, and was able to get with the IRS and work out a deal and finally get them out of our lives. Honestly, a lot of it was just due to ignorance and not knowing what I was doing. I learned that um, I can decide how much money I want to make on January 1st, right? Actually, we do it in the fourth quarter of the old year before the new year starts. This is our goal for the year, and reverse engineer it and decide how much money we're going to make, right? We'll use our P&L. We can decide if we need to raise our price a few points to raise our gross profit and all the things. And once I learned how to do all that, it really changed my perspective and changed my outlook. And, getting the IRS out of your life after they've been living in your spare bedroom for, multiple years is it's a very relieving, and a lot of weight lifted off your shoulders. So I feel like if I can, deal with those guys and come out on
Yeah.
the other side, I can pretty much lick just about anything.
Yep. Yeah, we've been fortunate that, as I said, like the 3,500 or so is the most that we've been in trouble, I guess I'd say, with them. But my last business, we had 25, 30 grand worth of credit card debt that was personally that we accrued because of the last business. And
Yeah.
I remember that happened and being like, how the hell are we going to tackle this? And then like in a matter of 6 months, we just put our heads down and grinded. We were able to tackle that. Uh, be able to get back on our feet, buy a house. And then I went full time into my agency. And then I'm like, oh, 25 grand worth of debt. What's next?
Yeah.
And so
Right. And
you can kind of battle it after that.
I actually had gotten myself financially in trouble with something worse than the IRS at one point in time. Um, And when I say worse than the IRS, it's because when you get onto this hamster wheel, it's super hard to get off. And that's what these, when you're an entrepreneur, you have a business and you start making some money or running a lot of money through your account. You have all these companies that reach out and want to loan you money. All these things. And I got on. It's basically a payday loan for business owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 2 or 3 year stretch of time where they were just sucking me dry. And they would loan me 30 or 40 grand, and I'd pay it back over the course of 12 to 18 months, and then they would renew it and get me in again and give me a little bit better rate. And one day I just drew a line in the sand. I quit paying it. I'm like, I just can't do this. This
Yep.
is a vicious cycle. And that was really kind of at the end of that and the beginning of my financial literacy, right, to start to begin. But if there's anyone out there that is doing the factoring loans or taking these little business advances, they call them MCAs, merchant cash advance,
Mm-hmm.
stop. Don't
Yep.
do it, right? Just if you can't make it, if you're not priced right, figure out why you're not making money. And it's better to go out of business than to get sucked in to these merchant cash advance people, because they will ruin your life. They will ruin you financially, and um, and have a smile on their face about it. So I drew a line in the sand. I said, I'm not paying these anymore. I moved forward, got my finances straightened out, learned about how to, read a P&L and all the things. Now I went back and took care of them, but
Yeah.
once I cut them off from my bank account, it was like pulling a tick off, right? Like because they were taking out 300, 500, 800 a day or whatever, right?
Yep.
It's crazy. So if you're doing that, this is a PSA, stop, right?
Yeah.
Just draw a line in the sand, walk across it, and leave everything else behind it, and figure out how to pay them later, right?
Yep.
They'll call you. They'll make a bunch of threatening phone calls and emails and lawsuits and all things. That's fine, right? Like you'll figure out how to take care of it later, but they will ruin your life if you don't. So
Yeah.
sorry, I went off on a tangent
No,
there.
that's actually perfect. Like I'm personally going through the process of like we've drawn that line of we're not using more. We use Stripe for like processing our payments. They've been phenomenal, helping us grow the business, this and that. But kind of the same thing. I was taking some of those like advanced
Yeah,
merchant loans,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
was like, oh, it's only a three, four, $500 fixed fee here, and then they take like, and that's their fee. But then to repay themselves, they take a percentage of the income that you receive to
yeah,
pay themselves back. And I had a point where I'm like, we have this cash flow like top of line, we have this cash flow coming in, but like, where am I missing the mark in terms of the money? And it
yeah,
was the 5 to 10% they were taking off the top was the difference of like us being able to make it each month and be able to like be cash flow positive. And it was like a moment for me where I was like, crap, like we got to get out of this. And so
yeah,
we've basically like sworn off of doing those. We actually just worked out something where we're kind of like paying those off to get them out of the cycle of taking care of like the 5-10% fee.
yeah,
But
for
it is
sure.
a dangerous and vicious cycle to be
Yep.
in.
If you're doing it, just stop, right? Like do whatever you got to do to get off of that and move forward, financially, because like I said, they will ruin you and they will not hesitate to do it. And
Yeah.
it's really, you know, it really, it's just a vicious cycle, right? Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people do the payday loans, the car title loans. They're not a solution to anything. They're a symptom of a bigger problem that you have to dig in and uncover and
Hmm.
figure it out, put on your big boy pants and just deal with it,
Yep.
So, and it's
You
really
can.
hard. I'm not sure, what your audience is mostly built out of, but if you're under $1 million a year in revenue or sales, right? Like that's their sweet spot, their juice. They'll tell you how good you're doing. Oh, $1 million or 800,000 a year or whatever. But cash flow is really, really critical in that, from 500,000 to 1.2, somewhere in there. The cash flow is super critical and super tight, and you have to have it because, you know, that size business, you still got a lot of growing to do, and it takes as much money as you can put in. It's not till you get to 3 or 4 million where you actually have a little bit of extra and some stuff
Mhm.
to lean on to start taking home a little bit and those things. But they'll just suck the cash flow out of you.
Yeah, you can basically think of these like merchant cash loans the same thing as the IRS. Like that's basically what people should be looking at them as.
Yep.
So,
Neither
um,
are good.
obviously, getting out of that typically for some people you can do it alone. You can draw the line in the sand, do it yourself, and get out free and clear and be done. For a lot of people, you need coaches, you need mentors, other entrepreneurs that you can lean on in the space help you get out of that. Did you have anybody that kind of helped guide and coach you, or did you bring in like a fractional CFO? Did you work better with your accountant? Like, what did all that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it was just me. So about 4 years ago, we got on Service Titan 3.5 or 4 years ago, and before that, around that time, I started listening to podcasts, right, and listening to books. I think most entrepreneurs kind of start with the E Myth, How to Win Friends
Hmm.
and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich, right? Those evergreen books, right? Like they're always something in there.
Yep.
I don't care how many times you listen to any of those, you always get something else, right?
Yep.
And I try and listen to each of those once a year or read them. And so I started listening to podcasts, and I ran across this guy named Tommy Mello, right? And most of your listeners probably are familiar with who he is if they're in the home service
Hmm.
space. But you know, and going back through Tommy Mello's older podcasts, they're kind of going along with his growth, right? Like with his trajectory. And there was listening to him, and there was so much things in there that were applicable to what I was doing. I didn't understand a lot of it. I didn't understand average ticket and all these things, so I started listening to podcasts and getting little tidbits here and there. And then I started getting curious, and I started reading books, and I started going on YouTube. And that was kind of my journey, or the start of my journey to wade off in the waters of knowledge, and start to learn what I didn't know. And I didn't really start to develop or get any real mentor help until um, 2020, April of 2022. Really, it was just 2 years ago, honestly. And the first event that I ever went to, anything of any sort, was in February of 2022. My friend Cristiano gave me some tickets to a roofing conference here in Dallas. He was a sponsor of that, and I wasn't a roofer, but I thought, I want to go hang out with these guys and listen to what
Yeah.
they have to say. And a couple months later, my CSM from Service Titan, I wasn't going to go because I couldn't afford to go, but she gave me tickets to Pantheon in LA that year. It was the first year they had it with COVID. And so my attitude when I got there was, I'm going to hear a bunch of things and learn a bunch of things that I could have gotten from a podcast. Boy, was I wrong. I got there, and what was said on the stage was along the lines of that, right? Like all the things that we've all heard. But what I didn't expect was the people I was going to meet, right, and the connections I was going to make, and the network that I was going to start to build with other people who were already, down the road from where I was at, had already gone through what I had gone through and lived to get at the other side. It gave me such encouragement and vision that I could do that. If they can do it, I can do it. And the encouragement that they would give me, they all gave me their phone numbers, right? Like Tommy Mello, Ben Davis from
Hmm.
Express Plumbing in Idaho, like all these people, Tom Howard, like all these people were just happy to connect with me and happy to help. And I tried not to wear out my welcome and call and ask them dumb stuff. But when I was really stumped, it was always just a phone call or a text away. And any of them, within just a few minutes would reply, and we'd set up a time for a call or whatever. And these people were super instrumental in helping to guide me into these things. It also, put me on this path of attending these events, right? And you go to. I don't know what your experience is with these, home service events, but when you go to, or any trade event really, but when you go, it's always a lot of times you see the same people there, right? Like a lot of these people go and they learn, and then they go home and then they come back and they hear the same stuff over and over, but they never
Right.
implement anything, right? So I was hungry and I was willing to do whatever it took. I was tired of sucking. So I would go and learn things. I would learn 15 things and come back and implement 5. And what I did was I pulled my people in my office one day. I said, the way we've been doing things, I owe you guys an apology. I've been a horrible leader and a horrible boss. We're not in the place we need to be. I said, we're going to grow this company. We're going to do it 1% per day at a time. And in a year, it may not feel like much, but we're going to look back and see how far we've come. And, I said, you're going to see a change in me. You're going to see a change in things that are around here. And the only thing that I can promise you is that things are going to change every day. So just set yourself up for that. Set that expectation that things are going to continue to change. The way we do it isn't the way we're going to do it. When we get to the next level, things are going
Yeah.
to keep breaking. And that's exactly what I did. And that's exactly how I got their buy-in. And, all my friends, my mentors all along the way, just a phone call or a text away, and they, will guide us through whatever we need. And,
Yeah.
I have the same kind of heart. I want to help people too, or they're just trying to figure it out, pay it forward. I mean, people would give me tickets to events. I couldn't afford them, and they would give me tickets. So now, I buy extra tickets to the events to give to guys who can't afford to
Yep.
go. I want to help.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this guy, I don't know if you know who he is, Adam McChesney. He runs a
Oh
coaching
yeah,
group about like building your personal brand and
I'm going to
kind
see
of.
him next week.
Oh, you are? Okay. So
Yeah,
I will actually be there for at least half the day. I'm trying to make it for the full day. So we'll actually get to meet in person.
yeah,
Man, I,
for sure.
I should have asked Adam, like I should have given him all the guests for my podcast and been like, hey, who's coming to this event? And then we could have
Yeah,
recorded it in person next week. But
I
uh,
was uh, I was actually on his podcast. I think early last year or late 2022. I can't
okay.
remember. Yeah,
Okay. So I will one have to go back and listen to that. I love listening to the podcast that, like my guests are on and all of that. But Adam actually, I guess back in February, he had like he and his wife had just had their kid, and they were looking at their calendar for the month, and it was like he was going to be gone every single weekend. And there was one weekend that he was in town, but he bought tickets to a workshop here in St. Louis, and he and his wife decided like, hey, I can't go to this, and he wound up giving me that ticket. And like that weekend, in a way, I'd say changed my life or changed the first half of my year for me. Just by him doing the simple gesture of giving that ticket away. So I've been doing a lot of the same things. My wife and I are flying to West Palm Beach next month for a conference that's all about like how women can elevate themselves and be better leaders and all that stuff. And I'm going to help serve at the conference, and that way she can attend and learn and everything. But I'm like, who can we buy a ticket for? That's all I care about is who can I buy a ticket for?
well, I post a lot about my journey, and I don't hide, anything, right? Like I don't
Hmm.
hide my struggles. I don't hide from. I'm not embarrassed of where I started or where I came from or the lack that I had. I'm very proud of where I came from, and I'm most proud of where I'm going, right? And I have a vision for it, which is something you really have to have. But the the toughest part of any of this journey and growth for anyone, right? And it's the one thing that I didn't get right away. I was well into going to these events and reading books and talking to smart people and thinking I was smart until one day I realized that my mindset was broken, right? Like I was raised by people who were raised by people with a scarcity mindset, and
Hmm.
I didn't know it, but it was inside of me too. And the day I shed that, it was just another whole another awakening. So now I don't think about things in terms of cost. I think about things in terms of value, and the little bit that people have helped me along the way, actually a lot, right? In the terms of cost that they give me for tickets or whatever has been the value that it's brought into my life just by learning something at these events or making a connection. And it really is, invaluable and will change your
Hmm.
life if you get into those situations.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know we're getting close here to time. I do want to kind of wrap this up and bring it back on here. So we talked a lot about like the going through some of the financial issues with the IRS, factoring loans, all those different things, growing the business. I know of a few people who I've had conversations with recently that like it almost feels like every time that they're trying to get back up that something just keeps hitting them and knocking them down and knocking them down. There's this bill coming in, there's this coming in, all those different things. So if there was like one piece of advice that you could give to those individuals to kind of get them out of that mindset of just like I'm just going to take these hits and like, hey, these hits aren't going to bug me anymore, and no matter what, I'm going to persevere. What would that advice be?
So really my unfair advantage for me, and I'll tie all this together, was realizing that um, I approach everything in my business, starting back, when I mentioned when I pulled my people in the office, right, through frameworks, right. We have tons of frameworks for everything. Frameworks are really the backbone of everything that we do, the backbone of all my ideas, the backbone of everything. And my financial framework that I put together was, like I mentioned earlier, I drew a line in the sand, right? Like if you're a lot of contractors, especially, or entrepreneurs, especially if you're sub 1 million, cash flow is always a thing, right? It's always a problem. And a lot of times you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, you know, been there, done that, got all the t-shirts. And it's really hard to outgrow that. But you will if you don't give up. But what I did was, like I mentioned earlier, I drew a line in the sand. Anything that I was already late on or behind on, I was already late and behind on. So if I was, if somebody called and I stopped what I was doing and went and jerked money out of my cash flow to make them be quiet or whatever, okay. But it just killed my capability to run. So what I figured out, on my own, was I drew a line in the sand. I left all my problems, right? I left them on behind that line in the sand, and I stepped across that line, used my frameworks to move forward. I paid all my bills moving forward. We weren't late on anything. We made contact with everyone that we were, behind with, or having issues with, and let them know what our plan was. And at the end of the month, I took a little bit of profit, and I went back and I paid on all those things, right? And before long, all that stuff goes away. I had a spreadsheet about this long of all the things that we needed to catch up on. And I remember distinctly sitting in my office and telling, the people that work in the office, I'm like, wow, we're about to run out of excuses. We're knocking all these things out. It won't be long, and you know, there's no more issues like this. And it really did change my life, because I wasn't just dragging my cash flow down every single day to pay whatever squeaky wheel it was. I isolated it. I kept everything. And when we did that, we went in and fixed our price book too, and made sure that we were, having some gross profit to come back and do those things. But I isolated it. This is a framework. Isolate your what you owe, what you're behind on. Isolate what it takes to operate your company and make payroll moving forward, and then come back and figure out that if you're priced right or not, where you got some gross profit. And at the end of the month, go back and pay some of that. You don't have to pay it all at once, but if you owe $150,000 in aggregate on everything, and you're doing, 1.5 million a year, that's only 10%, right? Like you can pay that
Right.
off. You can pay 150,000 off in a year through your cash flow. Just don't keep sucking it out of your cash flow, and stop digging the hole, right?
Yep.
So that's my tip. And to work off framework, build frameworks for everything. Make the least the least of what you can do, right? Make whatever that bare framework is. We go by outlines, right? Like Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, right? Like what's the header? And we operate off of that. And then we make it pay, and then we come back and fill in all the details, right? And then we build a process around it. And that's how we do everything here. So it really is
That's
an unfair advantage if
yeah.
you don't know how to
It's
do
Yeah, and what's crazy, I get people all the time. They're like, "I don't really think I have an unfair advantage," blah 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 blah. And I'm like, "No, like that is." It's like, to me, it's whatever that setback is. For me, it was my first business closing after we raised six figures in capital from a bunch of investors that were friends and family. We made it 18 months, and I mean, it felt like overnight it folded. And it's like,
it.
if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had as early of the success that I've had in my next business because of that. Like that is a true, in my opinion, a true unfair advantage.
It takes, listen, if you run a successful business and you've never had a hard day or a bad day or anything major, you're not running a successful business, because one's coming, you're going to have no idea how to deal with it. You know,
Yep.
I always tell my people, I joke, I'm like, you guys don't need to run unless you see me run. And if you see me run, it's too late for you. Right. But it's, it's always something. And, and I tell the people, we're scaling, right, and we plan on, pretty aggressive growth. And the bottleneck to growth a lot of times is leadership. So we're working on building leaders. And when we have our leadership meetings and things, I tell my people, I'm like, look, you're going to have problems. You have to expect that you're going to have problems. Leaders get paid to solve problems, right? They don't get paid to go and ask someone else how to solve it. You figure out how to solve it. You expect to have those problems. And the next time those problems come up, they're not that big a deal. I mean, they come in here, the place could be burning down, and I'm sitting in my lunch eating, I'm sitting in my desk eating lunch like nothing's going on. They're like, you're not worried. I'm like, no, we've had way bigger problems than this, and we've lived to tell the
Yep.
tale. Everything's fine.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So what's fun is I don't know if that is just what happened this entire episode as we've been recording. Like every once in a while, you like freeze, and like then we come back together, and you've been talking. I'm like, cool. Like I haven't had to mess it up, and it feels like right there you had just got done talking. I'm just sitting there looking at you because you had frozen. I couldn't hear anything after that. Yeah, I will say like having those meetings and like the frameworks and to talk with your employees. Like I'm putting my team in a position now where we are expecting our first kid at the end of the year, and it was like almost like an aha moment. I was like, holy crap, like I don't get any sort of leave. Like if I'm there's certain areas of my business that if I'm not there, it doesn't run. And so we're working right now on all those processes. I'm trying to help elevate my team and becoming more leaders. So that way, by the time the end of the year comes around, I can afford to take, even if it's a week or two off, or only work an hour per day or an hour every other day to make sure that like the business is still running, but just kind of checking in here and there, that I can do that. And that's through people.
yeah, for sure. And people are really, they're the reason you're going to succeed and the reason you're going to fail, right? You get to choose. And my people are the reason, are the reason I'm going to succeed, right? Like I hire good people. Like at first I had to go in and kind of, we built an org chart, and then I isolated all the things that depend on me. And I started handing those off one by one, and give the people the things, give them the resources, and get out of the way and let them do what you hired them to
Yeah.
do. It's scary as hell at first, man. I ain't gonna lie. A couple of years ago, I started doing that. We went on vacation. And I was a nervous wreck, but now I'll take off a week and I won't even check in. It's just
Yep.
it's really an amazing feeling when you can build a team, give them the KPIs, give them the processes and the systems, and then measure them by the KPIs, and then just come back and, take 100,000-foot view or a 10,000-foot view, and then see what you need to move around to make them more efficient,
Hmm.
make them more money, or whatever it is. And you make those tweaks, and everybody loves it. It just works well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Billy, thanks again for joining me today. This was a great conversation. For our listeners, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this. And please share this episode online on platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn so we can tag our guests and get more exposure to what they're going through and the business they're growing. But until next time, this is your Unfair Advantage.